Have you ever noticed that nothing about the Christmas story happens where anybody is looking for it? That's easy to miss because we've learned the story so well. But if you actually step back into it honestly, God doesn't arrive where attention already is. He doesn't choose places with momentum or people with influence. He steps into the middle of ordinary life and lets the moment remain mostly unnoticed. In fact, Luke tells us there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, going about their work like any other night. There was no anticipation, no expectation, certainly no sense that all of history was about to shift, and yet that's where the announcement lands. Not in a palace or a temple, but in the middle of a job that had to be done whether God showed up or not. God doesn't wait for spiritual readiness or ideal conditions. He doesn't require awareness before he draws near. He enters lives that are already full, already tired, already occupied with a bunch that needs to be done. And that raises a question that's worth asking on a night like tonight. What kind of God would do this? The answer is a God who moves towards ordinary lives. The shepherds weren't singled out because they were especially faithful. They were just present. They were awake. In fact, they were right where they were supposed to be, doing what the day required of them. That matters because many of us have the quiet belief that God shows up somewhere else in better moments, in calmer seasons, in lives that feel more meaningful than ours do. But Christmas tells us a different story. God doesn't wait for life to become impressive. He enters it as it is. Nothing about the shepherds changes before God comes near. Their circumstances stay the same. Their work doesn't suddenly become easier. What changes, though, is their awareness. They realize that God had been paying attention to their ordinary night all along. And that reframes how we approach Christmas Eve. Today doesn't require you to feel wonder or clarity or joy on demand. It simply reminds you that God knows where you are. Not the version of you that shows up for special occasions, but the one living inside the routines of real life. God doesn't bypass the ordinary to get to the meaningful. He reveals himself inside of it. So if Christmas Eve feels quiet or heavy or unfinished, let that be enough. This is exactly the kind of place God chooses to enter. Not because it's impressive, but because it's honest. Thanks for spending a few minutes before the noise with me today. And don't forget, God doesn't wait for your life to become extraordinary before he draws near. He loves you more deeply than you can imagine.